Hey guys, how's it going? Seán here. So I was recently tracking some heavy, higher gain guitar tones for a track that I was working on, and I used the Line 6 HX Stomp. It kind of dawned on me that even though I have a loan of two amazing Marshall amps here behind me, I still used the HX Stomp rather than the real thing. The top amp over here is a 1972 JMP 100 watt super lead Marshall head. The amp is twice as old as me, which is kind of crazy. Thanks so much to Dundie for giving me a loan of these amps. I'm very grateful for being able to use them for the last couple of months. When I do use this amp, even though it's run through the wall into a cab mic'd up in a separate ISO room in front of me, getting it to the point of saturation that's like so easy to get in the modeling world is at such a stupidly loud volume in the real world that I don't really turn it up as often as I'd like to. But a good buddy of mine, John Boyle, sent me over this to play around with for a few weeks. This is the 2 Notes Torpedo Captor X, and for those of you who don't know, it's a reactive load box. So I can basically run the amp appropriately, turn it up as loud as I want, run it into this. This handles all of the speaker loading and volume attenuation, and it also has an IR or an impulse response loader built in. So I basically don't need to run a cabinet at volume at all, which is really, really cool. So because I had access to this gear for a while, I decided to record a little shootout between a setup with the real deal Marshall with the 2 Notes Captor X and the equivalent model in the HX Stomp. My aim for this test was to see kind of how they compared to each other in the context of a song and a mix. For the Marshall setup, I used my trusty way huge green Rhino in front of the amp. I just used it to tighten up the low end a little bit and to give the amp a little bit of a boost. The preset in the HX Stomp is using the PLEXI normal channel, and I'm using the Scream 808 in front of the amp to kind of do a similar job. As far as amp and pedal settings go, they're not 100% identical. I just dialed them both in to the point where I felt they were appropriate for the track. Both setups are using the exact same impulse response from York Audio that make really, really good stuff. I'm using the Mix 4 from the M25 IR pack, which is a Celestian greenback in a 4x12 cab, mic'd with a 421, an SM57 and the rear of the cab as well. Both of the performances have no post-processing on the guitar tracks themselves other than a tiny bit of mix bus compression just to glue the whole track together. And for the song, I decided to use a riff from Nothing But Thieves' latest album. The song is called Unperson. I just picked it because I really like the band. It's a great riff, and I just realized that hopefully this video doesn't get taken down for copyright because it's not my song. Anyway, let's take a listen. So I've got the recording session open in front of me here so that we can listen to the guitars isolated from the mix. I've tried to level match these as close as possible as well. And yeah, let's take a listen. So, especially when using the same impulse response, which kind of takes the cabinet out of the equation as a variable, I think they sound really, really close. So I recorded the Marshall takes first, and then I spent quite a bit of time trying to match the HX Stomp to the real amp as close as possible. What I found in this particular test is that the Marshall had the tiniest bit more presence in the 5K and above region, and it had this little kind of resonance thing going on in the low frequencies around 200 to 250. You can really hear that on the opening notes of the riff, I find. So here's the Marshall again. And the HX Stomp. For what it's worth, when it comes to mixing, I'd normally filter out a lot of that high-end fizz anyway, and also control a lot of that low-end rumble, especially when recording rhythm guitars. I also thought the HX Stomp was a little bit more saturated and compressed, which resulted in a smoother sound than the real amp. I found the Marshall sounded a little bit more open, and it had a much more articulate pick attack. Each note kind of stood out a little bit more than the HX Stomp. But perhaps by dialing back the gain on the HX Stomp, I think I could have got them to sound even closer. I think in terms of sound, these tones are really, really close, and I'd be really happy with using either of them. From my experience using the HX Stomp in general, and this is just my opinion, I find that perhaps it sounds a little more polished and maybe pre-mixed right out of the box, but that's not a bad thing at all. In many ways, the sound you get out of a modeler can actually be the perfect thing that a song needs. In this test and in this recording scenario, I'd be more than happy to use either setup, and I think they both sound really, really good. And a quick note on the Captor X. I think it's amazing. I can't stress just how loud this amp would be at these settings in real life. I've often turned it up in the other room and I've put my phone in as a dB meter and it's just way above 120 dB. But all jokes aside, being able to run that amp into the Captor X at any setting you want, being able to run that tone with impulse responses almost silently is amazing. I say almost silently because the fans in the two notes are actually really loud and I didn't quite expect it. When you're running an amp with this much power into it, it has to react and dissipate that much energy and that much heat. So when you dig in, the fans really start turning up and down and reacting based on what you're playing, which is really strange at the start. But overall, I think it's really, really cool, and now I want to buy one. Anyways, I could talk for hours about this, but I wanted this video to just be a quick comparison between the two setups, and yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Big thanks to John for sending over the Captor X. Be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and let me know what you think down in the comments. I also have some HX Stomp presets available for download. I'll link them in the description if you want to check them out. And also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and click the little bell icon so that you can be notified of when I put out some new videos. Anyways, thanks for watching and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.